How do we do natural language processing consulting at Fast Data Science? There's no one-size-fits-all approach to NLP consulting, as every client is unique. First, a brief introduction to natural language processing, or NLP. When companies have large amounts of text documents, so imagine a law firm's caseload or regulatory documents in a pharma company, it can be tricky to get insights out of it. For example, you may want to know, of the thousands of clinical trials which your company ran, how many resulted in a particular side effect, when all that information could be stored in a stack of documents and you don't have time to read them all. Natural language processing is anything to do with automating this kind of task. An NLP consulting project starts with an inquiry from a potential customer. A consultant may have to do a fair amount of work before we actually make a sale. That normally includes looking at some of the customer's data, although the bulk of the data science work takes place after the sale. Typically, an inquiry comes in from a new potential client, often via the website, and the client may be aware that they need a natural language processing consultant, but not entirely sure what they need the consultant to do. That's fine and to be expected. The consultant can guide the client. The first message typically contains a brief description of the problem, although not of what is needed to be done. For example, we have a large data set and we don't know how to get value out of it, but we heard of this thing called natural language processing and it might be the answer. I'll set up an introductory call with the client and find out a bit more about their data. So that large data set could be, like this example, a set of 4,000 PDFs from the pharmaceutical industry, where each one is about a megabyte and contains a few hundred pages. The client may not even know what information they need from these documents. Or it could be this example, a set of company annual reports containing financial information, CEO statements, and so on, all formatted differently. Or it could be this example, a set of interview transcripts in a number of Excel files. Could be a customer database with text fields. It could be an accident investigation report. So this is an investigation report which I found on the internet. A client in shipping might have lots of documents like this, formatted in different ways, in different languages by different authors and so on. Or the text could be in a remote database which is constantly being updated. It could be market research. It could be a survey run across many countries in different languages. It could be CVs and resumes of job seekers. What all these problems have in common is that the data is in the form of unstructured text and the client has no control over the wordings used and the format. The first thing I would do would be to discuss with the client what their needs are and the problem at hand, and we discuss the various approaches we could take to solve the problem. One part that's really important is the need for business knowledge. The client might have to fill me in on how their industry works, how their business works, what the pain points are, what the inefficiencies are, and why these unstructured documents are causing a problem. So it could be that the client wants a tool which allows them to extract key bits of information or value out of the clinical trial protocols. Maybe they want to extract insights out of a huge set of interviews. So we'll think about what's feasible, and I'll have an informal discussion with the client about what we can achieve with natural language processing at this point. Now, 90% of the time, the data in question is confidential. So at this point, I haven't quoted the client, I haven't scoped the project, I just don't have enough information. So we have to move on towards NDAs. So I ask the client to send me an NDA and share with me the data that they are able to send. This can be something that they're able to send immediately, or it could be something that the client needs to go back and get approval, and it has to bounce around within the organization depending on the sensitivity of the data. And we have a discussion. Then this client sends me some data and I have a look through and I start to identify parts where I may be able to help. The next step is data exploration. Now we've got the documents from the client, we can start to look at them. So going back to the example of PDFs in the pharmaceutical industry, the first thing we have to do is to turn these PDFs into something we can analyze. I prefer to work in a tool called Jupyter Notebook. It looks like this, so I would run a script in Jupyter Notebook to pre-process my data and turn it all into text format. You can see this way of working is very simple and easy to do, and you can see in my output folder I've got some text files, and we can look at the contents of one of the files, and you can see it's a bit hard to read and understand now the formatting has been removed, but the text is there, the information is there. The next step is we're going to do some exploration of the text. So taking a small sample of about 100 files, I'll just try and work out how many pages each document has, and then we can plot a histogram of the document lengths. Let's have a look inside one of the documents and see how many pages it has and how much information is there. It's always a good idea to eyeball your data. And then the next thing we're going to do is check the languages in the documents. Are they all in English or are they in a variety of languages? Let's have a look. So I use a Python library called langdetect. That will tell me which languages are present. Fortunately, it looks like most of the documents are in English. The next thing we can do is plot some word clouds. This helps us see the kinds of contents of the documents. You can also segment your data set and plot word clouds of different groups of documents, for example, to see if some terms are used more by one author than another. This kind of analysis gives me a quick overview of the quality of the data and what I can expect to achieve with it. I would probably go on building some text classifiers, identifying clusters, seeing if I can make a machine learning model reliably predict the pathology or the area of a trial from these PDFs, or, for example, to identify the sponsoring company or the drug being tested, or in general, just doing a sanity check to see if I can extract anything of value from these documents according to whatever it is that the customer is looking for. After this exploration, I'll have a clearer idea of what can be achieved and I'll be in a position to quote the client. So I'll come back to the client with a proposal of what we can do. So that could be the case of a client who wants to estimate the cost of running a clinical trial based on the clinical trial protocol, which would be one of the PDFs that I showed you earlier, or it could be developing a web-based tool which allows you to drag and drop a protocol into it, and it would read the PDF, process it, turn it to text, and throw it through a machine learning model and give you an estimate of the cost, complexity, risk, or other factors. If we do this, we will need a lot of data and we will need to train and deploy a model and provide a production quality front end, for perhaps a web front end for the client. So we'll offer at least 3 options and suggest different areas to focus on. Typically, candidate projects could be rated in 2 dimensions. So every deliverable could have either high or low amount of technical effort needed, and it could be small or large in terms of the impact on the business. So everything is either easy or difficult and has a small or large impact. So you want to find the low hanging fruit, which are the projects which are easy to achieve technically, but have a large impact on the business. Hopefully the client will go for one of these projects, then we'll agree on a contract, terms, timeline, deliverables, milestones, and so on, and we'll pick one of the easy deliverables to start with, and we get started. Now the client has signed a contract, we're free to start the project. Before getting stuck in, I'd recommend to have a number of calls to establish requirements on both sides and make sure all parties are on the same page about the objectives and deliverables of the project. And then we can have a 1 or 2 day on-site kickoff meeting for data exploration. In the kickoff meeting, we need to discuss again what the client is trying to achieve. We need to ensure that there's agreement on the following points. What are we predicting? How will it help the business? Has the business attempted this before and what happened? How long has the organization been gathering data? Does the business have a preferred cloud provider, such as Microsoft, Google, and Amazon? Often, if a company uses Outlook and other Microsoft products, they prefer us to use Microsoft Azure for any deployed machine learning models, and their data protection officer may object to an external consultant using Google or Amazon products for machine learning. A good NLP consultant should be prepared to work with all 3, and all 3 of those do have good built-in natural language processing libraries and services. So we need to identify the stakeholders in the project and who we're going to be reporting to in the organization. So I've seen a number of projects fail in large organizations because the reporting chain between the data science team and the stakeholders had too many links. We can define the reporting frequency and the person to contact in case of anything blocking the project. We need to request access to the organization's version control, ticketing systems such as Jira, and any cloud computing accounts. We need to request physical access to the client's site if applicable, and their computer systems. We need to request access to all in-house data sources, any third-party data sources, and also any APIs. In most organizations, access might take at least a week to be granted because it has to go through the IT department, for example. We need to try and then get started in this kickoff meeting and build a very quick and dirty machine learning model. This is a sanity check to ensure that machine learning really can achieve something on this problem and what level of accuracy we should aim to beat. Although our preparatory work before signing the contract should have made sure that we're already aware of what we can achieve. Over the next few weeks, the data that we've requested and the other things that were blocking the project that came up in the kickoff meeting will hopefully trickle through, and we'll get access to things that we need and we can start the project for real. Now we're going to start building a model. So in the example of the pharmaceutical document, if we want to identify the pathology of a document, we now have a text classification problem. So we set about building a text classifier. We may have to label data or look for data from third-party sources, and we will decide how we rank our models. I would normally build around up to 200 models at this stage, starting with a simple architecture such as naive Bayes classifier and moving on to convolutional neural networks and transformers using software like NLTK, scikit-learn, and spaCy. I like to make a leaderboard of models so I can keep track of which models performed the best. Depending on the use case, accuracy may not be the only concern, as the client may need the model to be explainable or easily understandable for humans, or to be compact and quick to execute when it's deployed. Personally, I like to build a rough and ready front end quite early on because it helps both me and the client to get a clear understanding of what the model can do and how it performs in the wild. For example, I would make a front end which allows you to drag and drop a PDF, which would analyze it on the fly. I like to use the library Dash, which is very good for making beautiful, user-friendly graphs. Here's an example I made for analyzing legal cases. You can see you can drag and drop a PDF, and it will parse relevant information from the case out of it. Next, it's important to test the model and check it's performing as it should. We use held-out data which wasn't used for training or development. It's helpful to use people in the client organization who are unfamiliar with the project, and they can try out the model via the front end. Especially with natural language processing projects, it's very easy to input a document or a text which breaks the models or which had been completely unforeseen by the developers. So this gives us some good insight into how the model should be refined to make it generalize better. For example, with some of my pharmaceutical projects, I found that I had trained a model on a kind of document which was particular to a certain company, and then it turned out not to work so well when documents drafted to a different standard in a different company were put into it. Once the model has passed testing and quality control, we move on to deployment. We can deploy either to the client's on-premise servers or to their chosen cloud provider. We prioritize serverless architectures such as Azure Functions, AWS Lambda, and Google Cloud Functions to reduce costs. Finally, we will have a stakeholder meeting to hand over the project. The code should be fully documented and in a repository, and the client will be given control of that repository. I also make sure that everything is documented in a presentation and Word document, and I personally present everything to the clients and ensure that their technical staff are on board and are aware of how the solution works, and we can come to an agreement about any ongoing maintenance. Finally, we discuss any future work that may come out of the project. In accordance with our obligations under GDPR, we make sure that any sensitive data is deleted. By this point, if the project has been a success, the impact on the client's organization should be visible, and the client may be willing to enter into a retainer agreement or to discuss some follow-up projects. Often the first natural language processing project is only scratching the surface of what NLP can deliver, and if the client has budgeted for it, then there is a lot of potential for future work.